think so. I mean, so, we can ask them. You know, I never realized that there was they never just that.
No, I think they want to be folks.
About showtime.
Oh, you're up.
30 seconds?
Yeah, and then either next to it again. I think you gotta spend some money in the I know, I should. Yeah.
Well, I have some.
Well, I'll get them. We can also. And we just, but you have to remember that all of your expenses, part of that is spending last year, the literature over last year, so you have to take that out of the actually.
Good evening and welcome to the second May meeting of the St. Cloud School Board. It's 7 p.m. on May 24th and we're at City Hall. Our mission is to create a safe and caring climate and culture in which we prepare, engage, educate, empower, and inspire all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today's and tomorrow's society. Mr. Mose, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and now would you call roll?
Chair Al Mulgren.
Here.
Vice Chair Jeff Polrice.
Here.
Shannon Hawes.
Here.
Monica Segura Schwartz.
Here.
Bruce Henches.
Here.
Jerry Von Korf.
Here.
Bruce Mose here. Record will show or reflect that we are joined this evening by the Superintendent of Schools, Willie Jett, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Marcia Beisch, Executive Director of Student Services and Special Education, Carol Potter, Executive Director of Operations, Gary Ganji, Executive Director of Business Services, Amy Scalarud, Executive Director of Community Education, Adam Holm. We will be joined later by the Executive Director of Human Resources, Tracy Flynn Bowe, and we have Director of Community Engagement and Communications, Tammy DeLand.
Thank you. First up tonight on the agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board routinely adopts without debate. Any single member of the board may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. The full text of items can be found at the end of the agenda. On tonight's consent agenda, we have the approval of tonight's agenda, the approval of the meeting minutes from the meetings of April 26th and May 9th, the approval of the monthly treasurer's report for March 2018, and I think that's April. I think I forgot to change that on mine. And the approval of the monthly financial report for April 2018, approval of the payment of bills and other financial transactions in the grand total amount of $7,021,536.58, approval of personnel and staff changes, acceptance of grant awards and donations, approval of the list of graduates for Apollo and Technical High Schools, bid award for garbage and refuse service, Quarry View Education Center change orders totaling plus $1,580, and a new district office change order totaling plus $789.22. Is there anyone who would like to remove anything from tonight's agenda? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Mr.
I'll motion to approve.
Shannon? Second?
Well, second, I do want to ask a question.
Oh, okay. Seconded by Bruce. Any discussion, Mr. Mose?
To just, when you were speaking now, item K, there's a number on here that I thought was different than the one you spoke to. Would you just? The new district office?
I made two mistakes when I was typing this up. I must have had my mind on something else. So it's -1, so the district office change orders are -$1,655, not as I reported it earlier. So with that change, thank you for that, Bruce. And we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? So we're going to amend that motion to the new total. With the amended motion, Mr. Mose, would you call roll?
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Jerry Van Korf.
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes. Monica Sigurder-Schwartz.
Yes.
Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Jeff Polreis.
I'll vote yes with I want to abstain from the donation I made to Apollo.
He made a donation, so he just
Okay.
Thank you. Information items. The first item on the agenda for information items this evening is a presentation for South Junior High School. That will be given by Principal Jason Harris.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share about South Junior High School and our learning community. I think this is a good thing that the school board is doing to help learn about each school. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share tonight. Find a group of people who inspire you, spend a lot of time with them, and it'll change your life. I think every day I show up at work and I'm inspired by students, staff, and families, and that drives everything that I do and our team. You see it here at the top with a couple of our leadership staff, Mr. Heitkamp, Sandoval, our administrative team. You see a couple of our grade level teachers. You see some of our staff members that took part in an orchestra concert where they had to wear helmets. You see our students engaged in an all-tiger assembly, to our non-licensed staff that are being appreciated for all they do, to two staff members on Twin Day, Tiger Pride Week. Our mission drives us. Our core values, our strategic plan, this is the heart of what we do at South Junior High School. You see opening day with our team, and then you see our head custodial staff and head secretary being honored for all they do through resource training for our non-licensed staff members. Our commitment and community at South Junior High School, we believe all our energies and resources should be focused on student learning. And we need to do that through a collaborative culture with adults, community, students focused on results. You see it here at our Education Expo with one of our high school staff members and one of our junior high students that perform in gymnastics. You see it here with two of our teachers being honored for resource training as Teacher of the Year, both sixth grade language arts teachers. And we had a storm on our walkathon, and you see our staff members working together to put the inflatable back up. We believe through a collaborative culture, student learning can happen. We need to do that specifically focused in on achievement. The 4 areas that we feel that can happen is building community, creating norms, ensuring learning, and creating a safe, healthy, responsive environment. You see it here with our Walkathon. Currently, right now, we have 1,000 students, 70 licensed staff, and a total of 120 licensed and non-licensed staff. We've become a global school. We get kids from all over the world in the classroom, all across the United States. We have students from, just the other day, I talked to students from California. And how did you make it to Minnesota? His family migrated here. You could sit in the classroom and you can have a student from Kenya. You could have a student from right here in St. Cloud, all in one classroom. We've become a global community. You see it here on what we believe to really be an inclusive environment for all stakeholders, our students, staff, and our families, and really get to understand them. Our students created a display that says South welcomes you, and it called out multiple things that we're all unique and different in our own ways. And you see it here as you walk into our school. We know staff-student relationships is the key to student achievement. At the beginning of the year, we create that time where staff and students get to just have fun together, where we build that bond. We have a walkathon, and it's called Tiger Pride Week. So we have dress-up days where students, staff, this one right here is twin day. So you got a staff member and a student building a relationship. You have here our school resource officer working with our students to really help students understand the relationship between school, home, the police is not all a bad relationship. So getting our school resource officer to build relationships with our kids. You have our teacher cheering to help create signs for our students at a basketball game. And then you have myself just with the students having fun. We believe that staff-student relationships are key to student achievement. We also believe students have to have student-to-student relationships to create a positive community. When I talked about that Tiger Pride Week, you see the twin days for multiple students. You see down here our Latino Hispanic Heritage Leadership Group went to Augsburg a couple of weeks ago to really start to think about college. And we need to start to help students see that, plant the seed, help them find purpose, and also put them on the pathway to college and career readiness. We know a vital part of the relationship between home and school is critical in student achievement. We've tried really some non-traditional ways to create engagement with our families on top of the basic traditional ways of open house, conferences. We start to look at different models to bring families in. You see here, we do every trimester we do a Student of the Month breakfast for students that have made academic achievement, social achievement, attendance, and that kind of cooperative community that we look at. So those parents come in, they celebrate with their students for breakfast. We have up to 200 families that attend that once a trimester. You see here those families that come, they take a picture with their student with the South Tiger frame. That's kind of a good way to have fun with our students and our families. One of the things that we did this year was a cultural night. With that diversity, we need to create understanding for our students, for our families and our parents, and have interracial dialogue around race. So we had a cultural night. In March and April, we do a family night right before MCAs to really help families engage in how important the MCA test is, how do we have kids get healthy dinner, good night's rest, food, breakfast, and helping families understand how important the MCAs are, and then really engaging those families on resources that they need to do. We know school community engagement is at the heart of our mission. I'll start in the middle, where we connect with St. Cloud State in the BIGS program, where we have our students, a selected group of students that have mentors at St. Cloud State. You see in the center picture, this was one of the appreciation awards for our students thanking their BIGS. We call them BIGS, it's the BIGS program. Here, we're teaching our students not only about academic learning, but how they can be purposeful in the world. We did a book drive and we collected over 1,000 books to send to Africa, and we work with one of our St. Cloud State professors here. We have Mr. Moles down here at our 10-year anniversary for immersion. He wanted me to get him right smack in the face with a pie down here on the end. We know that community engagement, being visible, is key to student achievement. We have built multiple partnerships with all our local universities, local businesses, and continuing to live out our mission. When we bring staff, students, and families together, you have to have some collaborative norms and working as a collective group. Our norms that we work through at our school and our pillars are a kind, cooperative community. So when we meet, through parent meetings, through student meetings, through professional development meetings, these are the values that we go into these meetings for our staff and stakeholders to really work through. I talked about the collaborative approach. We believe in working together, staff, students, families, staff, student to student, in that collaborative effort around student achievement. You see here, student voice we believe is critical, where we have students do a professional development on really hearing student voice. These were 5 Muslim students that were a part of our community, future problem solvers, and they shared on their problem was around racial equity and gender, and they did a presentation to our staff, which was powerful. When we work with our staff on looking at data, we know small collaborative groups looking at achievement, focused in on goals are important. We have a team model, 6 teams. Most of the teams have the 4 core subject areas and 2 electives that they work together through data teams, looking at student data, looking at professional development, and really trying to make sure all kids have opportunities and are achieving at a high level. We know specifically in ensuring learning, our students kind of created this wall in the building. The road to college begins at South Junior High School. Not only college, but career readiness as well, and preparing our kids for a 21st century education. We know through the core values of working together, communication, teamwork, are ensuring that students get opportunities to be successful. One of the things that we focus on are 4 critical questions. What do we want all students to know and be able to do? How are we assessing to make sure students are learning it? Once they may not understand it, what things do we have in place? And if they already understand it, how are we achieving at a high level for those students? So when we look at what do we want all students to know and be able to do, that question is, we want all kids exposed to grade level content. We know kids need to be exposed to grade level content on how they're assessed for proficiency and growth. We do that through classroom assessments, we do that through MCAs, we do that through STAR assessment, focused on achievement to make sure all kids are learning at high levels. And if they're not, what tiers do we have in place? When you looked at the data specifically, we're still trying to solve a problem where we see a gap between our white students and our black students. When you look at the MCA proficiency, you see our white students at a high level above the state, almost at about 70% proficiency in reading and math. When you look at our black students, we're around 40%, 30%. And we've been really working on different methods to make sure all kids first have the opportunity to be challenged and then find the solutions to that. One of the biggest things, and I know you guys know this, when we look at proficiency, we focus in on growth. Every year kids should be growing. If they come to us at a lower level, they should be growing at double the pace. And we've seen that when you look at the data, 50+% of our students grow at either average or above average rates in math and language arts. So we're kind of focused in on that yearly growth to make sure all kids are understanding that, and really getting parents involved to have them understand how kids are assessed and they know what kids need or are able to do. So think about it, if you had a child at middle level, you want them to be exposed to multiple things. You want them to have exploration and multiple opportunities. You want them to be able to work in small groups. You want them to be able to critically think and problem solve as we prepare them for the world. We do it in the form of science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So that STEAM approach where we look at to really give kids a viable opportunity to make learning come to life, where we make it relevant to them. So you see our science and our math students working in small groups on a bacteria lab. This youth culture, they're learning on hands-on. They want to make the connection between learning and real life. And we know with multiple opportunities and making it relevant, kids have that shot. And you see most of these groups are working in small groups. Those are some of the things that we look at when we're in the classroom. How do kids move away from traditional, you just share information, to really start to learn and think on their own and work with small groups. Those are the things that prepare kids for the world. We know the 4 C's, collaboration, communication, creativity, to really help kids understand and make learning fun and relevant. Technology, our one-to-one iPads, 1,000 students have electronic devices. We use that to enhance learning. Now, compared to when we were coming up, kids have everything they need at their fingertips. And like I stated before, when we look at technology, we focus in on those 4 C's of really being creative, collaborating, and really using technology to enhance learning. Project Lead the Way, technology and engineering. You see it right here where our students are creating robotics through our green architecture, our engineering classes. They made a shed, really hands-on learning to give kids exposure and experience to things they might not be exposed to at middle level. We believe specifically kids need to explore, they need to find strength, they need to find their purpose, and they need to find things that are going to engage them. And I think in our community, kids have multiple opportunities to get engaged in multiple things. Our arts programs start specifically within the classroom. You see visual arts down here. And here was a mural where we work with Holdenford Middle School, and we did an art in residency where we created some artwork that's at the local library. But that collaboration between us and Holdenford was good for the kids to get exposed to difference and really focus in on learning with art. You see here we have our honor band that worked with St. Cloud State. These 2 top photos with one of the well-renowned composers. You have our students that took part in our, these are our musical students that took part in, I can't even think of it, Mr. Hinches, tell me, We took part in our Night of the Stars. There we go. Night of the Stars. Well, our kids got to showcase what they can do around acting in musicals, but it all starts within the classroom, within our language arts programs, and giving kids opportunities there to find their strengths and interests and purpose. And I kind of talked a little bit about the language programs. Here's our advanced language arts program. For our kids that are at high levels, they tested probably the top 94% of our student achievement. They were working on an actual project that they were trying to figure out inertia, and they were trying to do this thing for NASA. So you got kids really starting to think big now and really explore opportunities. You see our immersion celebration. We have a Chinese offering where kids get a chance to learn Chinese. So that exposure to multiple things and finding interests, we feel, is at the heart of middle school. You have one of our students, one of our second language students, teaching a class on Somali language and really working with a small group of students. So really giving kids an opportunity. We know that works for learning and achievement. Our physical education, healthy lifestyle, we know that's very important. We really, in our health and physical education curriculum, have really tried to find different ways to expose kids to different things. We had students that were skiing, hadn't been exposed to skiing, but right within our confines of our school community could go out to the field and work on skiing. We have a rock climbing wall we just brought to life. So really giving kids opportunities around health and fitness and moving away from some of your traditional activities for students. And we know no learning occurs unless we have a safe, healthy, responsive learning environment. And I think we use a good model with our PBIS model to really set the stage for kids social, emotionally, to set high expectations on what we expect from all kids. In our school, it's a kind, cooperative community, and we want to recognize kids when they hit those high levels. You see it here. We recognize students weekly who meet those expectations. They make a big deal out of the frame. We make a big deal out of it. They get a certificate. Their parents can come in, celebrate breakfast, and really helping kids understand appropriateness, what's appropriate for school, what's not appropriate for school, and really helping them understand how to socially and emotionally learn. Excuse me, at middle level. We see emotions all over, and I think we really try to be responsive to that to help all kids achieve. You see it right here. We do at least once a trimester, we do a Tiger Pride Assembly, where we get all the kids together and we celebrate all the great things. And then if we have to talk about how we can learn and improve together, we could do it in that setting as well. The kids love this. It's a good way for them to see the students, the staff working together. We do fun games here. And then you see just families coming in for lunch with their kids to really just get a chance to feel our culture in our school community. Our advisory program starts at the beginning of the day for 25 minutes. This is where we really tailor in and work on social emotional learning for kids. How do you really solve conflict? How do you problem solve? How do you compete with your neighboring advisory? You see right here, we did a South Winter Olympics. So we can make learning fun and then really talk about what's important around achievement. And we do it in multiple ways. In small group, we created a book drive. Those 1,000 books started here with the advisory. We do a house cup that once a month, kids can gain points through their advisory through activities. So making learning fun and also making it purposeful of how kids could give back to their school community, their local community, as well as their state community. You see it right here. We do a read out with the American Heart Association. Our schools become the model in central Minnesota for middle schools to really talk about health and fitness. And you see a couple of our students here selling t-shirts to create a read out as we help kids give back and learn about healthy fitness. So when kids already know it and they're achieving at high levels, we expose them to opportunities to really, in leadership ways. Our school was selected 1 out of 3 schools within the state for our contributions on how we give to our school community, local community, and national community through We Act. They did a cultural literacy tour and they selected our school. You see it here. It was a great event for our students, our staff, and our parents to take part in. You see here our AMO leadership group, where we work with collaboration with Tech High School and helping kids build the bridge between middle school and high school. And they went down to the University of Minnesota. So starting to help kids really plant the seed about college and career readiness now to where you see we're right now on a water campaign to make sure everybody has clean water. We're collecting water for families in schools in Africa. You see it right here. To kids really being boisterous and standing up for what they believe around We Are Silent through a cause. This student was standing up for bullying. And that same day, which was ironic, it was the school walkout for across the nation. We had students that walked out on gun control. So you have students that were silent for a cause to students outside saying, hey, we need something around gun control. It's teaching kids about who they are, giving them opportunities to learn and start to prepare our kids in middle school for life now and finding purpose, making an impact. We talk about it all the time. And you see our young ladies doing that read out for the American Heart Association. So when you have building community, creating norms, ensuring learning for all kids around 21st century skills and education, here are some of the results that you get. I'll start here. Here's our robotics team that qualified for state. Our students that shared their student voice were ranked in the top 3 in the state for community future problem solvers. These were all Somalian females. We had 5 award winners for the Martin Luther King Award through St. Cloud State. We had the St. Cloud State Math Contest where middle school students from all over the state compete. These 3 young men finished in the top 2% out of 800 kids. And then here you see 2 of these young ladies were our Central Minnesota Spelling Bee champs. And then you see our slap shots. 2 of these students are South students with the mayor. We believe when you put those things together, you get these results around achievement, learning, and really helping kids understand and finding strength and purpose at a young age. And we're preparing them for the world now. We put together a video just to show our community. I'm not a great actor, so when I see some of these, sometimes I just shake my head, but you guys will get a chance to see in action South Junior High School. Welcome to South Junior High School, home of the Tigers, where we're a kind, cooperative community. Our focus is to engage, empower all stakeholders as we prepare our students for a 21st century education.
I am very proud of our curriculum in science at South Junior High. We have all sorts of activities that not every kid gets the opportunity to do. If they come to South, they get to do dissections. They get to look through the microscopes. They get to use the calorie lab to figure out how much energy is in a piece of food.
Students are empowered in Project Lead the Way by being able to actually do things. They're able to think for themselves and make their own decisions and cut lumber and actually build a structure, build a wall, and carry that wall over and stand it up and position it and do all those wonderful things.
Our EL department works with these students that come to our school to really help engage them at the level that they are currently speaking English, and also challenge them to work harder to reach the next level. We really work with the skills that they already have and they're coming into our classrooms with, to bridge the gap between what they don't know in English and what they already know in their own language.
It helps them learn that they can move on and learn the language and develop into professionals and help the Minnesota community overall.
It's a thrill for me to watch the students be able to interact and learn from each other. Here at South, it's just a great place for students to learn and work together collectively.
In the choir program here at South Junior High, students are empowered to find their voice in a leadership role, using their voices outside of the South Junior High walls in a positive way.
We want to get our kids passionate about the learning that's going on in this room. And I think we see that passion with the growth that we've seen in our students, especially on their STAR scores from spring of last year to spring of this year. Our students are showing tremendous growth in the areas of math. And I think it's because they're excited about what they're learning.
So AVID allows students to experience a lot of college life. They learn how to take great notes, preparing them for college. They learn how to organize themselves, to prepare themselves, not just for classes here at South, but for when they go to the high school. And then we look into the future so that they can actually see their dreams come true when they go to college.
So students are able to kind of work at their level, and then they also get to have an opportunity to listen to some of those other students that are talking and challenging each other and learning about each other's life experiences, which completely adds to the engagement of what we have going on in here.
I think the engagement that comes with language learning comes with finding connections between things that are part of your everyday life, things that you already know and love, whether that's sports or entertainment or just talking with your friends, and literally translating that into another language, but at the same time also giving you a window into things that you don't know as much about.
Here at South, the Spanish immersion program opens a lot of doors for us and gives us opportunities that we wouldn't have before.
We do a lot to involve and engage the students. For example, one of the main things that we focus on is catching those good behavior and giving incentives for the kids displaying their great behavior.
REACT is a program that challenges kids to commit to making a difference in a local campaign and in a global campaign.
I feel empowered to help others, that even here in St. Cloud, Minnesota, I can help others way out across the globe.
South proud.
South proud.
Orgulloso de South.
South proud. South proud. South proud. South proud. South proud.
Questions?
Bruce.
Thank you, Jason. Jason, what I wrote down here and what I heard frequently, and which I'm appreciative of, and I think it's the great message, is that you were, nearly everything came back to student achievement when you were talking about relationships. Staff and students and home and school and community, those kinds of relationships all coming back. You brought it back to student achievement. When you were talking about collaboration and how collaborative efforts happen throughout the school, you brought that back to student achievement. Your safe, healthy, responsive learning environments, you connected that back to student achievement. And your proficiency focus on yearly growth, and you brought that back as a step towards student achievement. I think any time that we hear student achievement at the center of any narrative, at the center of any conversation about schools, when we hear student achievement being said over and over again, that's, to this board member, very reassuring and very appreciative. And I just wanted to note that those are two great words that we all should be using in every conversation we have, student achievement. Thank you.
Thanks.
Jerry.
My three sons went to South. The first, when South became a middle school. When you leave elementary school and you're looking at going to junior high or middle school, it's a place where parents step back and ask, can I really put my kid there? And when my kids were making that choice, a lot of their friends were worried that South, although it was a wonderful place and great teachers and lots of tremendous opportunities, there were people that were making the jump to a private school because they were worried that there wasn't a challenge for all kids. And now my kids are long gone, but there's a generation of friends that I know who are going through that same concern. And some of them are partners of mine and some of them are friends of mine. And what I'm hearing from them, two things. First of all, wow, I am so glad that I picked South. My kid is taking really challenging courses. There's a wonderful environment there for them. And had I put some money down to a private school, I couldn't have expected any more. And then the second thing is, boy, I wish people knew that, okay, that sometimes they get into argument with their friends. Why did you send your kid to South? I mean, really, I'm over here and I'm paying good money and I must be getting something better. And so I think, I don't know what the answer to that is, but if we could just bottle that somehow, every group of parents, whether their kids are struggling to learn English or they're behind and they want to catch up, they all kind of want the same thing. They want their kid to have a great challenge. And what I'm hearing generally, and it's just anecdotal because on the school board you just really you hear from some people and you don't hear from everybody, but what I'm hearing from people is these ringing endorsements, thank you so much for what South is doing for my kids. And the more that people could realize that we've got a great writing program over there that is challenging, second to none, that kids are taking difficult math and getting even more math opportunities than you could imagine, and plus this collaborative environment. Thank you for what you're doing, and I just wish that we could keep spreading the word.
Thank you. I think, Jerry, you hit it. I think it happens in the day-to-day conversation when schools come up of how you might hear a perspective of our school, and we need to give a positive image always because of those experiences. I have the conversations daily. I challenge folks to come to South Junior High School, come visit, see what's taking place within the classrooms and the community. I think through multiple avenues of communication, how do we continuously build partners within the community and sell our school? It's competitive right now. I just had a mom on the phone from St. Kate saying, hey, I want to give ISD 742 an opportunity to come back to middle school. I want to give them that chance at South Junior High School, and we'll take those opportunities. We'll give families the opportunity to come, or stakeholders, and share all the wonderful things. But as you know, we still have a perception out there of, hey, you don't want to send your kids there, and we'll just continue to challenge through conversations and get it out there through multiple vehicles of all the great things that are taking place. And Mr. Mose, you hit it. It's at the heart of it is student learning, and how do we achieve through multiple opportunities for all kids.
Monica?
Hi, Jason.
Hey, Monica.
Thank you for everything. ¿Cómo así que tus estudiantes no hablan español, especialmente los de inmersión? I noticed that you had a Spanish teacher talking there. I have a couple of questions. I'm very impressed with your numbers, so kudos for that, especially attendance. You have 95% attendance in the school. I did notice that you have in this school specifically 48% of black students compared to 44% of white students. And white students are doing at 50 and 60, over 50 and 60% average in reading and math, 50 and 60 to 80, while black students are not. I also noticed in your video that you have very few, or I don't know if I saw any teacher of color in your school. So I have a question about this. I was looking at the participation in extracurricular activities, and I also see very low participation of students of color in a specific school where you have a lot of students of color, especially black students compared to whites. I mean, you have half and half. So I'd like to ask you, what are you doing to address this?
I'll start with the initial question that you talked about, where we see our white students achieving at a higher level than our students of color. I think I just had a conversation with a teacher the other day. The same information comes to a student of color in the classroom, right? Our white students is sinking. Our students of color is not there yet, and we're working with our teachers on culturally responsive teaching. And that goes into what we talked about and you heard, really helping kids critically think and work in small groups, helping kids see the end result. College is an option, career is an option, and really help all families, specifically families of color, understand that, and giving them support systems to do that. You talked about the extracurricular activities. Some of the times where a student has to go home and watch their brother or sister pulls them away from an activity. If we don't have an activity bus at the end of the day, a barrier might be transportation, where you're not getting all kids those opportunities. But we creatively try to find opportunities for kids to get involved in multiple things. As I stated, you saw the result with your 5 Somali female students that were top 3 in the state with community future problem solvers. Those students had an opportunity to get into extracurricular activity. You know it yourself, our leadership, our Latino students, they just were at a Augsburg College for a conference for students. We have to continue to create avenues and opportunities for kids to be exposed to those things. And I think it won't happen overnight. We just need to collaboratively work together, find what's working. I think we have a good formula around our effective schools model to give kids opportunity, and we'll start to see specifically around proficiency. But when you look at the growth data, our kids of color aren't far behind. They're right there. Even our Yale kids are growing at average or above average rates and growth. MCA testing, I was just talking to a teacher the other day. How do we build strategies in? If we don't teach kids how to take tests, right? It's not in the curriculum. How do we give them opportunities or feel that they're going to do well if they don't have those chances. So we've been really trying to find creative ways to get kids on test taking, key words through vocabulary, reading comprehension, to look at those things. But I think our collaborative model and our learning design at our school, working in data teams, collaborative teaching, we found some strategies to help all kids. But I don't think we're going to see it in the next year or two proficiency-wise, but we'll continue to grow kids every year. So when your son or daughter, our goal is, here's the path, we want to grow them to a higher level, and we start from where they come from. Staff of color, this is my 4th year. When I took over, I was the only one. We have one licensed special education teacher, and we probably now have 15 staff of color in various roles, from Hispanic to Black to Somali to Asian, where we want a makeup of our school to be represented amongst our staff. And we've been really conscious on trying to make that happen in multiple ways. Like you and I know, you see our younger culture not going to education. I think we found some ways through the colleges, St. John, St. Ben, St. Cloud, St. Cloud Technical, St. Cloud State, where we've really had our college students come into South and work in the classrooms, so we can build that bridge to get more staff of color in our school and our community. Participation was the specifically kind of what I stated before. We see multiple variables of why kids aren't involved. Like I said, if I got to go watch my brother and sister after, if my parents work 2 jobs, that might not be a viable option. How do we create it where that can be at the beginning of the day or through the school day? One of the things that we talked about, and I think this is something the board might want to look at, we don't have a late activity bus for kids to go home. Most districts have a late activity bus. So saying, hey, kids that want to stay after school, you got a late activity bus, transportation is not the barrier. I think we've been finding creative ways through the school district vans and really helping our staff. Like you took a group of students through the van, I think we've been finding creative ways to get all kids. Our motto is every kid should be involved in something. And we know when kids are involved that they become a part of the community, they become vested on achievement and learning.
So just a follow-up of that. So I'm taking notes. So some of the things that we need to look as a board is about, and as a school, I guess, as a district, about some possibilities of having covered transportation and other expenses, daycare, for example, at the end of the day, to facilitate student participation, and also, and especially transportation, looking for extending the ability of students to participate in the afternoons to activities at school. So I'm taking note of that. Thank you. And I also wanted to say kudos to you and thank you for the STEAM instead of a STEM emphasis.
Right.
For the people that don't know what a STEAM is STEM with art. So thank you very much.
Yes.
I think that you're the only principal that I've heard yet talking about a STEAM versus a STEM, and I just really wanted to congratulate you for that effort.
Thank you.
And that's it. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I'd like to just, if I may, please, just going back to this activity bus notion that we don't have that, and I'd like to just, rather than put the question to our principal, just Mr. Superintendent, is that a budgetary item that we just can't get that done, or what might be a softball answer here?
Yep, so, Mr. Moses told me a pitch, and so I'm supposed to hit it out of the park, and sometimes I strike out, so we'll go ahead and try to answer that one. I think one of the ways that we've been addressing or researching, and we know this, and you're listening to Principal Harris talk about that, but we have our ad hoc committee, our activities ad hoc committee run by Mr. Hinchis and Mr. Holm. And so they've been bringing different recommendations or different things that they've had discussion about from that committee, presenting information to cabinet, presenting information to board finance. And so as it relates to, there's some suggestions there. And just like with all different things, there's suggestions or there's recommendations. Then as a district administration, we bring it to the board with what we cannot do, what we recommend, how it fits within our budget. I can tell you point blank, we would love to just have everything, to do everything, and just let's do it. I don't think there's anybody in this room that would not like to have activity buses for all, that would like to not have every program possible for all of our kids to have that exposure, that word exposure. So there will be something coming as it relates to activities or trying to get more kids to participate. It might not be all in the kit and caboodle in this year, but the goal is to somehow, some way figure out how to do this. He talked about vans, he talked about partnerships and volunteers and things of that nature. We've had conversation with Metro Bus, okay, because our Metro Bus folks recognize the importance of our kids participating. And so we're exploring all these different avenues, and I'm not saying it's at the very beginning stages, but we're in that conversation. We are trying to figure it out.
I think Mr. Jett hit on a piece with the Metro. They have now donated specifically tokens for kids to catch city bus. So that has helped with kids towards that barrier piece with transportation.
During the school year, you mean?
Yes. So either to school or after school, they've donated bus tokens for students.
Percentages.
Maybe just some additional comments to what Superintendent Jett was saying. As part of our student activities study, one area we studied was participation trends, and we looked particularly at gender participation trends, diversity, and free and reduced lunch. And we found that we're fine really with gender in terms of female and male participation in the activities program across the district. But in terms of race and diversity, more white students are participating than students of color by a significant amount. But when we look at free and reduced lunch, overwhelmingly, kids who are participating in our activities program are not on free and reduced lunch. And there's a wide gap there. And it points to what you're talking about in terms of the barriers that stand in front of kids who come from families that have economic challenges, from needing the kids to work, to babysit for the single mom who's got a job, to just finding a way home from practice, paying the activity fees and paying the associated costs to participate, and finding a way to be involved in an activities program as a third and fourth grader when many of our activities programs are starting on a competitive nature. Because they come from a challenging background, they can't afford the travel teams and things, and it puts them at a great disadvantage, and in a lot of ways it dampens their participation at the middle school level. Then add to that the fact that when the school board cut the middle school activities program in 2002, and it was eventually returned, it wasn't returned in most individual activities. It was returned in team sports. And so there's a lot of activities for which, if a seventh grader wants to participate, they have to find their way over to the high school. And that becomes an even greater challenge than for a student facing economic challenges. I would even say, Principal Harris, when you go back and look at your reading scores, for example, MCA reading scores, the big difference is between kids on free and reduced lunch and kids not on free and reduced lunch. Much greater than the difference between different racial groups. And I think as a district, and as a community, and even as a society, we have to figure out a way to address the disadvantage that some kids face as they are coming through our educational system. And how do we best provide support, encouragement, and opportunities for those kids. And I think you're doing a lot of those things right now in our middle schools already, but I think it's important for us to get our head around that.
I think you hit on something that I didn't speak on, that barrier around socioeconomics, right? Resources. And I think we stated giving kids opportunity, believing that all kids can learn and achieve, and being creative, like you kind of talked about, and finding ways to get all kids engaged.
I just wonder if there's also possibly a social factor of who is perceived as being on the team and whose friends ask other friends to be on the team. And I don't know, I went to a small high school. Everybody had to be on the team, otherwise we didn't have a team. So lots of my teammates were, you know, didn't have a whole lot of advantages, but we were all across the spectrum fighting to get them on the team because we needed people, and they felt welcome. And I just wonder if that's another factor. Who's the captain of the team? Who's in and who's out? And maybe that, and I don't know what you do about that, and maybe I'm off base there, but it might be that my friends are not on the team, and so I'm not gonna overcome those barriers to get on the team.
The social element of friendships, that plays a part into it. I think Mr. Hinch has hit it. When kids start sports at first and second grade competitively, and then in middle school where I'm just learning the basic skills of a sport, that might be discouraging sometimes. But I think our district does a good job of, specifically at the middle level, of giving kids opportunities to learn those basic skills. Because if they didn't have that opportunity, what else? And I think we'll just continue to work at getting kids engaged and participate. But we have the opportunity. Most school districts, you look at it, when you move closer to the metro, don't have middle school sports. They do it all through community. I think we do a good job of creating that opportunity to learn those skills. But it's a couple of things. I think social, and then kids starting at a younger age competitively.
Willie.
So a couple things I just want to point out. I've walked the halls with Principal Harris, and I was young once, and when I watched him do what he does, so when he first started this presentation, he was mellow. And when I'm walking with him in the hallways, there's never a mellow bone in his body. He's flying around, he's high-fiving, he's in classrooms, and so I was shocked and surprised to see this mellowness, but then I looked at the clock and I understood. One of the things I want to express or make sure it's said out loud, Jason is the principal of a school that is growing, that people are wanting to attend. This school is ever changing, it's ever evolving. It has all these things that he mentioned, extensive programs and programming, and it's a model. And I heard Mr. Von Korf say the world needs to hear more of that. And this man up here is humble, but he works extremely hard with parents, communities, community partners, the staff and the students, and you could see it in the pictures in the slide. But the biggest thing that you always hear him talk about is providing access and opportunity, but more importantly at the junior high or the middle school level or that level, is he always talks about exposure. He's always trying to make sure that his kids or his students have exposure to different things so that they can see the entire world and figure out where their niche is and what their interests are. The other thing, when I use the word model, I just have to say this. He said he's been here 4 years. And so his administrative team has changed each year. And in that, they always say, train the trainer, grow your own. But he has modeled it and done it so well that if you look between Lori Putnam and Mr. Richard Chicola, so Lori's at Kennedy. Richard Chacolis was an administrative intern and now is an assistant principal at Talahi. Shannon Avenson is now at the district level for next year. There's something that he's doing right at South in terms of helping us to grow our own and just to help us to create that atmosphere in that community. So I just wanted to make sure I said that to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chet.
Doesn't look like there's any other questions. Thank you, Jason, for the presentation. It was very good.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you. Next on the agenda tonight, Dr. Marcia Beisch is going to give us a summary of the May work session and a preview of June's work session.
The first item on the May 9th work session was the New Tech High School update. David Leopold, architect with IIW Minnesota, along with Charles Eisenreich, Tech High School principal, and Kyle Walter, the on-site project manager for ICS Consulting, presented an update on the progress of the New Tech High School. Just briefly, Mr. Leopold presented information on the monument sign design and locations. Principal Eisenreich presented updates on the furniture, and Kyle Walter reported on the construction progress to date. The second item on the agenda was the Quarry View Education Center. Preston Ewley, owner of and CEO of R.E. Morton, presented an overview of the construction progress, noting that they are in the final stages of the process. And they are on schedule to be completed by July. The future district administrative offices was the final update regarding facilities. Gary Ganji, Executive Director of Operations, presented an update on the status of and design and remodeling of the former Minnesota School of Business, which will now be the district administrative offices. And that completion continues to be on schedule for May 31st. We had an update on partnerships by Tammy DeLand, Director of Community Engagement and Communications, along with Dr. Sylvia Huff, Director of Research, Evaluation, Assessment, and Grants. Ms. DeLand presented shared information about an internal committee being developed to define partnerships as well as their purpose and function. A district-wide database of over 200 partnerships is housed on the district website. Dr. Huff stated that we have begun a process for measuring the effectiveness of the partnerships. A survey feedback tool has been developed for the purpose of assessing the effectiveness of community partnerships and a way to provide feedback. The next item on the agenda were proposed revisions to Board Policies 511, 713, and proposed new policy 799. Board Member Bruce Henches and myself reviewed proposed revisions to Board Policy 511, 713, and the new policy 799. Board members provided feedback and suggestions regarding those policies, and those will be coming back tonight for a second reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beisch. Next, we move into discussion and action items. The first item we're going to be looking at is a revised fiscal year 18 long-term facilities budget, and Amy Scaller, the Director of Business Services, is going to present.
Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, members of the board. We're here tonight to bring a revised budget for the 2018 long-term facilities maintenance budget. I have with me Derek Fagan. He's our Director of Buildings and Grounds. In case there's any questions specifically, more in detail about the long-term facilities maintenance program or any, specific projects that we might have underway right now. So basically the reason that we're here is that last year we had an unspent portion of our long-term facilities maintenance budget, about half of that coming from budgeted budgeted kind of deferred maintenance upkeep type projects, and the other half from health and safety projects coming in less than we had planned. That amount, which was $1,116,473, is sitting in the reserve fund balance for long-term facilities maintenance. So we have budgeted and planned to spend those funds this year in 2018, and the way the new program works is MDE will automatically do a levy adjustment for your unspent prior year amount unless you increase your subsequent year budget to show that you're planning to spend those dollars. So what you see in your board packet is two budget spreadsheets, one that has the original budget. The original 2018 budget was $5,850,000, and you'll see a revised amount of $6,966,473, with that difference being the exact amount that is in that fund balance. So this is basically a formality so that we don't end up with a levy adjustment to take away dollars that we've budgeted and planned to spend. Are there any questions on anything?
Doesn't look like anyone's got any questions.
Al, I'd make a motion to approve that revised budget.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff.
Second.
And we have a second from Monica. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, Mr. Mose, would you call roll?
Maker of the motion, Jeff Pulvis.
Yes.
Second maker, Monica Segura Schwartz.
Yes.
Jerry Von Korf.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Next, we have another action item, and it is to rescind board action of June 22nd, 2017, relating to the TIES membership withdrawal notification. Gary Ganji is going to present that, and Amy, I believe that you are going to be presenting with him.
Yeah. I wasn't sure how long it would take Gary to get back.
Don't worry, Amy.
Perfect timing.
Yes. Good evening. It's about a year ago we were here to talk about our TIES membership, and we're here tonight to give a little bit of an update and and have some recommended action. Just a quick overview. TIES is a cooperative of a number of districts, over 40 districts, many of them metro, a few outstate, including St. Cloud. They provide services such as technology applications, technology support, training, and each year we bring to you a couple of teachers that are nominated for Exceptional Teacher Awards. I think we've had 8 through TIES since we've been a member. Last year, you approved, upon our recommendation, a letter of intent to TIES to withdraw from membership. That's required by the bylaws to give a 1-year notice. And then before we actually withdraw membership, we bring it back to you with the opportunity to rescind. And this evening, our recommendation is to rescind that letter because the TIES landscape has changed since we were here last. Last time we were here, we were concerned about the financial future of TIES. Since then, a number of members submitted a letter, much like St. Cloud. This past winter, there was a membership meeting, and the membership voted to dissolve TIES. And as part of that dissolution, TIES was basically put up for sale. A vendor has purchased TIES and its liabilities except for the building, and it's more financially beneficial for us to stay as a member through this dissolution. Amy presented information to Board Finance last week on this in a little bit more detail, and Amy's going to give a synopsis of that now.
So the current TIES bylaws have a formula, a calculation as to what a member district's obligation is if they intend to withdraw. And so it's a complicated formula that factors in all of the debt of TIES, a share of the building obligation. Based on that calculation, a year ago, as districts had started to notify intent to withdraw, TIES had calculated what that per pupil amount would be for the current year, and that amount is $44 per pupil. So for our district, that amounts to approximately $430,000 would be our cost if we don't rescind the resolution or the letter of intent to withdraw. and we proceed as originally planned and withdraw as of June 30th. With the new proposed plan and an organization coming in and acquiring TIE's operations, they are taking on a significant portion of the debt that TIE's has, and so with that change, the new amount is estimated to be between $17 and $20 per pupil. That there's a range because it depends on what some of the member districts who had intended to withdraw do. If some of them continue with their withdrawal and pay the $44 per pupil, which we're not anticipating that a lot would do that, that may lower the cost for all the other districts, but it won't exceed the $20 per pupil. They have a resolution that the board will need to approve pending, our action to proceed with not withdrawing. That would come forward to the board next month, and that resolution does state that it will not exceed that $20 per pupil. So that would be our maximum, roughly half the cost. In addition to the $20 per pupil, or $17 to $20 per pupil, there's a $2 to $3 per pupil fee that our district will pay, or each district will pay next year for building maintenance costs. As Gary mentioned, the building is not being purchased by the organization who's acquiring TIE's operations. All of the member districts will continue to own that building until it sells. So it is being marketed for sale. Once the building sells, then all the districts would receive their proportionate share of the proceeds from that sale. And so the $2 to $3 per pupil maintenance cost, we will likely receive some, if not all, of that back once the building sells. Questions?
Bruce? So you've gone over what we would have to pay if we were going to withdraw from TIE's. What do we pay to stay in TIE's?
So TIE's will essentially cease to exist. So we're staying a member through dissolution, essentially. Dissolution is anticipated to be July 1st, pending how long that legal process takes to transfer ownership. But right now they're estimating that to be July 1st. They're asking that all the districts have those board-approved resolutions by June 30th so that everything can hopefully take effect at that date. We will continue to purchase services, or have the ability to purchase services next year and for future years through the new company. They have guaranteed to not increase prices, so they're going to hold prices based on the current year rates for next year. So for our district, we purchase internet services and some data warehousing resources. Currently, we also pay a $5 per student membership fee to TIE's, and that will go away. So we won't be paying that starting next school year.
So the new organization is going to continue to basically provide the same services, but on a per service fee arrangement.
Correct.
So that we couldn't end up having any bigger obligation financially by remaining a part of TIE's until it dissolves.
No.
Can we get any benefit if they actually sell that building?
We will. Each district who stays in through dissolution, when that building sells, will get their proportionate, based on their enrollment, prorated from all districts that are still members as of the dissolution date, will get. How much that will be, obviously depends on what they get for the building. But
for anybody who's seen that building, it isn't worth much, I don't think. It looks like it was a 1950s Soviet era gray building. I don't know.
They must have upgraded it, because when I was there, I thought it was pretty nice.
Oh, really?
The inside's nice, the outside is.
So I got to ask this. So my understanding there is if the building sells, we get our portion of that. I know you made a statement there that we pay a $2 to $3, up to $4 per student maintenance fee for next year, but then we'd recover that if the building sold. But wouldn't we recover a whole lot more if the building sold? Otherwise, aren't the maintenance fees? Well, something's way out of whack.
Well, the $2 to $3 isn't just maintenance fees. It's the maintenance fees and, kind of the overall, I'm sure the realtor's fees are part of that. And it won't exceed $3, so that same resolution has a $3 cap in there. Part of the per pupil amount depends on how long it takes to sell. If they sell the building in the next 4 to 5 months, it's going to be on the lower end of that range because we don't have electrical and utility and costs. I think the concern right now is that the amount that the building would sell for, a big portion of that has to go to repay the debt because the building isn't paid off. And so that's where that range comes. Currently, we levy for that. I know there's been some talk about future legislation as to whether they'll allow districts to continue levying for that after ties dissolves. For right now, our current levy that is coming for fiscal year 19 already has next year's payment in it, but for subsequent years that'll be something that has to get sorted out because the levy authority lies with ties, and so if ties dissolves and the building still hasn't sold, what are the district's obligations for that lease? But each, as time goes on and those lease payments continue to be made, then your net proceeds that you'd get back would increase.
Okay, I have a question. I'll defer to Jerry.
Okay, Jerry.
I wish I could vote against this, but you make a compelling case. If I were voting against it, it would be because I would be taking my vote out on the mismanagement that occurred in years past, and you sort of wish that somebody would go out and seek reimbursement from the people who built $1 million parking lot that was under contract for 1/10 of that, but that's all in the past. We're trying to make a best of a bad deal, so I will support it. I'm kind of wondering, do we have anything else where we're in like this, where we can incur derivative liabilities? Not in this, or is this it? We don't have any other joint operation that could...
Right, this is it. Okay. There's really very few organizations like that out there statewide, period. It was kind of an anomaly. There's other arrangements that we're part of that are fiscal host situations, but those are kind of just flow-through entities. There's no assets or liabilities that would...
Good enough. And thanks for answering my questions before the hearing, because I was wired against this, but what you're doing is obviously the right course.
Is there any parameters on the sale of the building as to, say, minimums or...
That was being discussed at the meeting, and it was preliminary. So there is no parameters at the moment that has been expressed or that's been conveyed to us. But they will let us know that as they move forward.
And as owner districts, my assumption would be that before any sale would be final, all of the member districts would have to vote to approve that. And so those, if there was something that seemed like it was unreasonably low, my assumption would be that as member districts we would get together and make a joint decision as to whether we would approve that or not.
And that is correct, because they stated that at the meeting, that we would see things.
Okay.
Bruce.
This is very interesting discussion, and I'm listening carefully, trying to absorb it all. Seems like there's a lot of moving parts in here for me right now. So if the operational recommendation is to rescind the board action, and when that passes, where are we positioned then, and what are the next one or two things that happen after that?
Good question. So once the board approves the action to rescind, we will notify ties of that so that they know that we intend to stay in through dissolution, so that they know we'll continue to be an owner in the building. And then at the next meeting, we will bring forward the resolution that outlines those per pupil amounts. That resolution is required for each district's board to pass in order for the ownership, for the transfer of ownership of the entity to occur. And so all of that's expected to happen within the next month or so with that July 1st date. Beyond approving that resolution, there's really no further action on our part. Every year we'll continue, to evaluate from year to year whether we continue to purchase the services that we're purchasing through the new organization, or whether we're able to get the same level of service on those items elsewhere. And so we'll be, doing that analysis. But otherwise, really, the organization will cease to exist and our obligation is done. The only other further action that would happen is there's likely some board action if the building sells as an owner to approve that transaction. But again, we don't have a timeline on when that would specifically be.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this one? If not, we're looking for a motion.
Yeah, I'd make the motion to rescind the board action dated June 22nd, 2017 related to the ties membership withdrawal.
So motion, Jeff, and I'm looking for a second.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, if there's no further discussion, Mr. Moses, would you call roll?
Maker of the motion, Jeff Porras.
Yes.
Second maker of the motion, Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Monica Seguda Schwartz.
Yes.
Jerry Van Korf.
Yes.
Bruce Mose. Yes. Al Dahlgren.
Yes. Next on the agenda, we have review and approval of any tentative contracts, if any. Tracy, do we have any this evening? We do not have any contracts to approve this evening. So we'll move right to the next item on the agenda, which is proposed revisions to board policies 511, student fundraising, 713, student activity accounting, and proposed new policy 799, booster clubs and school support groups. This is a second reading, and Dr. Marcia Beisch and Board Member Bruce Henches will present.
I forgot to greet you last time. Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, and members of the board. I'm just going to briefly explain, and if you have questions, Mr. Henches is going to help answer those as well. So Mr. Henches and I reviewed the policies, and based on your comments, I hope you had a chance to review the policies. With 511, there are just some minor wording changes, and those are in green font. The first of those changes takes place on page 2 in section 4, student activities, teams, clubs, and the third paragraph down on page 2, we added the wording or appropriate administrator, same with the next paragraph, and the final paragraph in that section, and also in recommended guidelines. So not just principal, but administrator, so including others who may have responsibilities in the building. I believe those were the only minor changes to 511. There were no changes to 713. 799, there was a statement added to the definition section of the policy, and that a note, if you will, it's in green. While this policy applies to and provides guidance to both booster clubs and school support groups, portions that are obviously directed only to booster clubs may be disregarded by school support groups. And it also says to see the building principal if you have questions about this policy and your support group. And the reasoning for this is that we just, I know there was a suggestion to maybe have a separate policy. We thought that that was not necessary, but by having that note, it made it clear that we could keep one policy and that there was a distinction between booster clubs and school support groups. There was also some minor wording on page 2. You'll see in the third paragraph down with other student fundraising, the word other was added. On page 3, section 11, rather than using the word do's and don'ts, we added the words best practices. And then booster clubs, school support groups, instead of may, we changed it to are encouraged to. Also at the top, I'm sorry, I missed at the very top of page 3, rather than using the word should, we used the word shall not use and must disclose. So making that very clear about what the expectation was. And then on page 4, in the middle of the top section there, booster clubs, school support groups, rather than using the word should not, we changed that to are discouraged from. And then in section 12, we added some words about the principal or designee shall provide this policy and guidelines to the officers of all known school support groups. in that first paragraph as well as the second paragraph. So questions, comments? Mr. Hinchus, would you like to add anything before we go to questions or comments?
No, I think you hit everything, unless there are questions.
I do not see any questions. I do not see any questions here. This is a second reading. It will come back at the next meeting for a third reading. It'll probably be on the consent agenda, but we can pull that if you would have any further questions or clarifications that you'd like in the policy. So I'd encourage everyone to look at it again after the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Next we move into reports, and we're going to start with the superintendent's report. Mr. Willie Jett.
Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, members of the board. 11 students from McKinley ALC from St. Cloud Area School District 742 had the unique opportunity to spend 3 days in Winona, Minnesota, learning about small business ownership. Students experienced life on a college campus while being mentored by entrepreneurship students and volunteers from Winona State University. Several local entrepreneurs shared their stories and their businesses to the students as they hosted tours with questions and answer sessions. If you spoke to our students or if you listened to their feedback, they loved it. South, and the principal's not here now, South Avid students celebrated with their bigs at St. Cloud State University to wrap up the end of a successful year of mentorship. Bigs on Campus was an idea created by Big Brothers, Big Sisters, who approached the late Dr. Potter, former president of St. Cloud State University. Their combined vision was to create a community engagement program to the university that mentored St. Cloud community youth. With the program being such a big success in its second year, it is projected to double in participation or in participants for the 2018-19 school year. As someone who was at that celebration, I've been at both, and just say if the very first year it was 12 to 15 students, this time it easily had 40. And just to listen to the students talk about their experience with their mentors, it's kind of incredible. We Act and SAD, Students Against Destructive Decisions, along with teacher Kathy Helminick, worked to present a mock crash scenario for the juniors and seniors at Apollo High School a few weeks ago. The student organizations reenacted the before and after scene of an auto accident which took place due to distracted driving. This community partnership involved Minnesota State Highway Patrol, St. Cloud Police Department, St. Cloud Fire Department, Gold Cross Ambulance, LifeLink, All-Star Towing, Midway Iron, Centricare, and Miller Carlin Funeral Home. The Minnesota Association of Secondary School Principals is proud to partner with Horace Mann for the 2017-18 Star of the Innovation Award. This award is designed to recognize member schools statewide for the development and support of an exemplary and innovative education program in their school. This year, Kennedy, along with Lori Putnam, their principal, wins the award for their collaborative with the College of St. Benedict St. John's University, and congratulations. The June 13th board meeting and work session will be held at St. Joseph Government Center, located at 75 Callaway Street East in St. Joseph. The meeting is scheduled to begin at 6:30 in the council chambers. Again, our June 13th board meeting and work session will be held in St. Joe, and the meeting will begin at 6:30. And lastly, birthday wishes to Amy Scalleroot and Gary Ganji. And that concludes my superintendent's report.
Who's leading us in happy birthday?
Twins. Okay, next we move into board development, policy, and governance, and that will be presented by Shannon Hawes.
Board development, policy, and governance met this past Tuesday on the 22nd, and by request we were asked to discuss the board reorganization meeting for 2019 and to try to come up with a date that we could announce so people could plan accordingly. We looked at board policy 202, which states that the school board shall meet annually on the first Monday in January or as soon thereafter as practical. So looking at 2019, we were comfortable with a time period between Wednesday, January 2nd through Monday, January 7th. looking at that, Monday, January 7th is the first Monday in January, and I would like to propose that to the board members. Do you have any conflicts with the reorganizational meeting being on the first Monday in January, January 7th for 2019? If you do have a conflict with that, then the other dates that we would like to look at would be the Thursday or Friday have been preferred dates. That would be January 3rd and January 4th. So please let me know if you have any conflicts with, let's start with January 7th. That makes sense. Then we discussed retreat times for this year, and one question that was topic of discussion was whether or not we would have 2 or 1 retreat, being that it's an election year and we have possible 3 new or 3 seats that are up for re-election. We would like to include the new incoming board members, if any, and so we would like to at least have something in place after the elections, and we'll continue that conversation, whether it's 1 or 2 meetings. We'll continue that when we meet next time. Topics that were under consideration for retreat topics were the strategic plan as well as enrollment. Then we also had a look at community input during school board meetings. And Jerry's laughing because it was a good conversation, and we will continue to have that conversation. We were looking at the verbiage in Board Policy 206 and 207, what that states and how we are currently set up for community input. Again, next time we meet, we'll continue that conversation. And the next time we meet, it has been announced that we did change our time, so we'll be meeting on Wednesday. We moved our date over 1 date, and Mary has publicly announced that time change for our meeting. A couple other things. Al Dahlgren, myself, and Jeff held a informational meeting for potential candidates for school board election. I was pleasantly surprised. There were 7 people there, and first, Tammy, I want to say thank you for announcing that. I was very impressed with when we asked, where did you hear about this? So I heard W. John District website, Twitter, parent emailed newsletter, Facebook, so quite the wide variety of places that they had ran across it. So thank you very much for getting them there. I think it was very informative, and I would definitely recommend doing that each time.
I thought I counted 9. I wrote down.
Oh, 9? Okay.
Check it. We had a couple latecomers, so
yes,
it was actually 9.
A couple people came in, yeah. So thank you. Well worth the time to put into that.
That was, it was a 1-hour scheduled meeting, and we went almost 2 hours. There was a really active, lively conversation with that group, so it was really
great questions, yeah. And then one other thing that I wanted to mention, make sure everybody's aware that on June 13th, our board meeting is going to be at City Council Chambers in St. Joseph. And while we've had a discussion about reaching out to different communities, know that this first one is actually because there was a conflict with Boardroom A at the district offices at Apollo. So if somebody's wondering, well, I thought we were going to do it at the school. Well, we've put this in place, really looking confused. Is that correct? That we could not use the board development had a request from community linkage to hold work session meetings in different schools and communities. And so somebody asked me, well, why are we at the city council chambers? That's not a direct correlation between the linkage committee's request.
I think.
Is it?
I think that it is actually.
Oh,
because it was schools and communities, because when that question came up, Really, there's Kennedy, I know in St. Joseph, but when you go to Clearwater and Clear Lake, there isn't a Clearwater school for us to go to. But we would be able to probably go to their government center so that we would be able to go out into those communities.
So this one is at St. Joseph, we're at the, we're not at the school,
We're at the city council.
City council.
Chambers, yep.
Okay.
But just for a clarification, this isn't to take care of that goal of getting into the community with our meetings, is it? It would seem as though, I think the intention, and Mr. Mose can speak to that more, I thought the intention was to go to these communities during the school year, more than during the summertime, but.
I think that was the spirit of the request, but I see no fault in this, but I think it's just, I think it kind of went there but it was outside of the thought of the committee. But I
that I would agree with, yes.
Yeah.
It is part of that. I mean, when we couldn't use the Apollo room, and we said, where are we going to have the work session?
Okay.
We immediately went to, maybe we should go out to one of the communities, and St. Joseph was a choice, so.
So Bruce, can you expand on the spirit of the request? What did you mean by that?
Nope, I'm just simply agreeing to what you are proposing tonight. And that should be sufficient. I think that's a good choice. Apollo, it wasn't available, and that was a school. And I think what Bruce was speaking to was that our intention was that we were wanting to get out to schools in the school year. But you know what? This has lots of flexibility. So there's no need for any more
There'll be plenty more.
Yeah.
So that's it, thank you.
Thank you. Next is community linkages and engagement, Mr. Bruce Mose.
Community Linkages Engagement Committee met on May 10th, and in attendance, board members Monica, myself, and Bruce Henches, community members Brenda Voigt and Pat Welter, and staff members Sylvia Huff and Carissa Hopkins-Hale. The topic of this presentation that day was District 742 partnerships, and because our standing committees have 3 board members on it, and all of us have good perspectives and some different perspectives on things, I asked for this meeting to have Monica Sigurda-Schwarz plan that meeting, and she did, and she will make this presentation this evening. You do have the notes in front of you. They're quite thorough, and they speak to the meeting. And I would reference you to those, but Monica?
So I met with Bruce previous to this meeting to a little bit of planning for the meeting, and he was asking me for what groups or organizations we should have to present at our meeting. And what I thought that we could do is to understand better our district internally, to be able to explain it outside when we go out to make visits to other partners or constituents, like, for example, what we have been doing with the mayors. So in order to do that, we thought that would be important to start with our communications plan. So we invited Tammy Delan to present to us and to tell us a little bit more of our communications plan. That day that we had the meeting was actually casually the day after we had our work session meeting, which we had a presentation from Tammy about partnerships. So we went over that presentation again, and we had a discussion about partnerships and how can we support and strengthen partnerships as a committee, and what can we do to support that. So it was basically our conversation for that day. We thought that we might have Tammy coming back that day. Unfortunately, she had to be excused because the governor was here, and he's more important than us. So we're thinking that we might have her again later. And as Bruce says, the notes are very thorough, so if you have any questions, please ask Bruce.
More on that?
That's our report.
Okay, thank you. Next committee is the Finance and Audit Committee. Jeff Polrice.
Al, board members, Willie, we met on May 17th. Present there was myself, Amy Skellerud, Al Dahlgren, Scott Andreasen, Willie Jett. An observer was a lady named Gwen Anderson. She is, correct me if I'm wrong, Willie, but she's getting her superintendent hours by attending meetings, so you'll probably see her at some meetings in the future. First topic was the gymnastics update. Willie is expecting a rationale from Joel Stark Halls regarding the space needed for gymnastics program. Willie will forward this rationale to the Board Finance and Audit Committee members when he receives it. The tentative plan is to lease space at the Minnesota School of Dance for practice, approximately 2 months in the summer and 3 or 4 months during the gymnastics season. They would use the space at the new tech for about 3 weeks for official meets. The next part was the fiscal year 2018 revised long-term facilities maintenance LTFM budget, which Amy already talked about, so we're going to skip that. The next session subject was good news. No lunch price increase. Amy reviewed the handout comparing our lunch and breakfast prices to other districts. There has been a 1-year exemption by the state to the pay equity tool that's required by districts. What this means is we do not have to raise our prices for the fiscal year 2018-19. Amy suggests not increasing the breakfast or lunch prices for those years. This does not require board action as it is not a change. Next topic we talked about was the board-approved referendum renewal. Amy explained that it was 5 years ago that the legislation allowed districts to convert voter-approved levies to a board-approved levy. This resolution was passed 5 years ago, also included the non-metro rate per student. So we lobbied and received permission for us to use the metro rate. So the first resolution was rescinded and a second resolution was passed a year later, which currently means we're 4 years into the 5-year second resolution. We will need to review this next year when our 5 years is up. There is a legislation bill being reviewed which would change these funds from a board-approved levy to local optional revenue, which means we wouldn't need to pass a resolution to continue this funding. The next topic was the rescinding our ties membership, which is also we talked about this evening. I guess that's the report, but I'd probably have a question for Board Member Henches. Did that die when everything else failed too? It did, okay. All right.
Everything died.
Everything dies. That's the report. Thank you, Jeff. Next is Legislative Committee, Bruce Henches.
Okay, Mr. Chair and board members. Yes, the Legislative Committee met this morning, actually. Present were board members Haas and Polrice, Peter Hammerlich, and our guest was Amy Skellerud as we discussed the disaster that is referred to as the 2018 legislative session that was just completed. Actually, our main discussion was over the 2 bills that Governor Dayton vetoed on Tuesday, the omnibus tax bill and the omnibus supplemental budget bill. Both were huge bills. They were a collection of many bills, and unfortunately it's become the practice of the legislature to put everything into these huge bills right at the end. Just to say a few things about them. The tax bill was vetoed mostly because I believe that the governor felt the tax breaks that were given to get to tax conformity were not fair and were unsustainable for the state. At least that's the reasoning that he gave. There were a couple of items in the tax bill that would have impacted us. One was that it contained $50 million of new funding from the state general fund reserve. I shouldn't say new funding, of funding from the state general fund reserve, and allowed districts to transfer money from our 2% staff development set-aside that the state requires. The governor had proposed $138 million of new money for this from the budget surplus. The best the legislature could come up with was transferring money out of the reserve fund of the state general fund and allowing districts to spend down staff development funds. In addition, it would have allowed districts to transfer any amount from their community education fund on June 30th of this year and next year, if there were budget surpluses there, in order to help pay for the cost of general education. The supplemental budget bill would have provided $28 million for 18-19 for school safety costs across the state of Minnesota and $30 million in the next year. The governor had proposed similar amounts to that, but he vetoed the entire bill. So those funds will not be coming through. There are some other things that will not happen because the bills were vetoed. First, the bills called for a civics test that would be used for a graduation requirement for all students in order to get their diploma. That won't happen at this time. There will be no school safety assessment team requirements. The bill would have required school safety assessment teams and district safety assessment teams. There will be no expanded mandatory reporting of all compensatory aid to show if the funding raised student achievement. This would have been an extra burden for districts to do additional reports to show the impact that compensatory funding was having on the achievement rate for students in their district. There is no increase in dyslexia assessment requirements in this bill. And again, not that we shouldn't move forward with plans for that, but there are no funds and no additional requirements. The bill would have required a summative assessment, a rating system from 0 to 100 points for every district school, for every school in the state of Minnesota, based basically on, again, MCA scores. That rating system will not occur now because the bills were vetoed. Unfortunately, a couple of negative things. The Special Education Working Group was included in the bill. That group that was supposed to take a look at how to address the special ed cross-subsidy. That is now gone also. And how it will be picked up remains to be seen. And then District 742 had a special pilot project in the supplemental budget bill for EL summer school. Initially, it was supposed to be $420,000. In the final bill, it was $300,000. But since the bill was vetoed, we will not be able to conduct a EL summer school with those funds. One of our first legislative platform issue was to address the special education cross-subsidy. And we worked with Representative Knobloch quite a bit in doing that. However, in the end, there was no funding directed towards the special education cross-subsidy in any of the bills. The governor had proposed $19 million, by the way, not $50 million as I have on the minutes, so if you want to correct that. However, he then changed his proposal to the $138 million crisis funding for all districts. However, the veto of the supplemental bill included a provision that would have directed the state to spend an additional $36 million in 2018 and $41 million in 2019 in adjusted special education funding based on enrollment estimates as of February of each year. This is not new money, but it's money that now will not be sent out to districts across the state. Now, in discussing this with Amy this morning, it's unclear how this will impact us. But when you look statewide, it'll be $36 million this year and $41 million next year that will not be distributed in special education funding. The two bills that could impact our district that are still on the governor's desk and probably will be signed are first the bonding bill. And in the bonding bill, there is $25 million for school safety grants that can be used to renovate existing buildings. It's on a first-come, first-served basis, divided equally between outstate and metro area schools. So $12,500,000 for each. We presume we're outstate. It says, therefore, up to $500,000 per qualifying building or district. So, we obviously have some plans for doing some safety improvements, and once the governor signs the bill and the directions are sent regarding the application process, we might be able to qualify for some help in some of our, the 4 schools that we're looking to make safety entrance improvements at. And then the final bill that's sitting on the governor's desk is the pension bill, which is a very important bill for the district. And it says that the pension adjustment, the increased cost for the employer, it will be picked up in the school aid formula. In other words, it will come from state funds, not from the district funds. This could have been a very high cost to District 742 as well as to other districts, but that's the way the bill reads. The assumed rate has been changed from 8.5% to 7.5%, and employees and retirees will make additional contributions to the fund, but by doing so, TRA and the other pension funds in the state should be 92% funded within 30 years. So, we discussed then a little bit about what's next. Assuming that there is no special session, and the governor has said there won't be, the next session begins in January of 2019. We do have elections this fall, and the Legislative Committee began discussing a fall legislative candidate forum, which we did 2 years ago, and we would plan to do it again in mid-October, probably right in this location, and we would invite all of the local legislative candidates. We will prepare questions that we will present to them to test their support of public education funding. We are discussing a moderator and would take suggestions from any board members who might have an idea for who would make a good moderator of this event. And we are also going to be developing questions. And any board members who have questions that they would like to have addressed in the forum, you would be welcome to send those to me, and at our August Legislative Committee meeting, we'll be putting those together and finalizing the plan for the forum. Tomorrow, there is an AMSD meeting, and Dr. Tom Melcher will be presenting to the Board of Directors information on the financial impact of the legislative session. So it should be an interesting meeting, and I'll certainly share any information that we're able to get from that meeting. So the Legislative Committee then will not meet again until August, since there isn't much going on at the state capitol for the next couple of months, and we will begin planning the forum, the election forum for this fall. I did include, by the way, 2 sheets from AMSD. Scott Kroonquist puts these together, which really explains, maybe in a little more detail, the impact of the tax and supplemental budget bill vetoes, as well as the bonding bill and the pension bill that's coming down the pike, hopefully. That's it. Anybody has any questions or comments?
Thank you, Bruce. Next up is Personnel and Negotiations, Monica Segura-Schwartz.
Good evening, everybody. So our last meeting was May 2nd, and we discussed update in administrative appointments. So we had South Administrative Intern Kaylor Sanders, South Administrative Intern Andrea Winning, Tech High School Administrative Intern for School Transition, Cindy Patton, Polo High School Assistant Principal Heather Fryer, Tech High School Assistant Principal Jesus Sandoval, South Junior High Assistant Principal Joy Kelpcam, ALC McKinley Principal Alicia Fisher, Apollo Principal Al Johnson, Director of Student Services Shannon Avison, Director of Care and Treatment Programs Brenda Blackmore, Director of Special Education Programs, Colin Carlson. I'm going to add also that for the positions of assistant principals and principals, we had a search and we had about 70 applicants. And we also have some update in negotiations, and we discussed the superintendent evaluation that we are doing, an update on the update of the superintendent evaluation. I had a miscommunication with Tracy, so about sending the survey to the staff. So I just thought that she was going to do it, and I forgot to tell her to ask her to do it, and then left the country. So I told her a little later that delay our the time that we set up the last meeting. So we send we send the link for the staff to reply to it this week, and then we have them reply by next Monday. The rest of the schedule is still the same. We will have meetings with staff next Wednesday. Chair Al Dahlgren and I will be meeting with the staff, and we be asking them for input. All but two staff that are in vacation next week, so we will be rescheduling those two for the next week. So that's the update on that. Any questions about any of this?
Jeff?
Can I get an electronic copy of that, Monica, so I can better digest the valuable information? You had a lot there, and you can send me a copy of that? Thanks.
Sure, I can do that. Also, I would like to request to make a motion to go to a closed session for the update in negotiations with the unions.
Can I request that you do that after we do the future agenda items? But I'll give you time before we close to make a motion.
Well, I wanted to make the motion to include it after before the update on the agenda, but I'm flexible. Can I make the motion now, or?
Before the, what update? Before?
So I want to make the motion to have that closed session at the end of the meeting.
Right, so that's what I'm saying is, can you wait until then to make that motion? Let us finish these agenda items.
Sure.
Thank you. Next would be the Achievement, Integration, and Equity Committee, Chair Van Korf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee met on Tuesday, May 22nd. Lori Posch asked that you have an opportunity to speak to the committee to provide an update on the work that's being done, planning towards what might be done next year in the area of dyslexia. We had a long and thoughtful discussion, and at the end of that, I asked the committee, are we recommending that support of that? And then the committee unanimously recommends support. I'm not going to describe what that plan is because it's going to be carried, as I understand it, to the Finance Committee to discuss the financial implications, and it's going to get carried to the Personnel Committee to discuss the Personnel Committee recommendations, and who knows, as they're thinking this through, maybe there'll be some improvements or changes or whatever, but we were all enthusiastic. Understand that we're not planning, no one is planning to have something in place next year that would be everything that we could possibly dream of. In fact, part of the, and as you know, the committee has been kind of pushing to do as much as we can, but part of the logic of what you're going to hear when you hear it is that nobody is doing this anywhere full bore, except perhaps in a school that specializes in working with kids with dyslexia. And since we're not doing what we want to do, we don't want to wind up doing it poorly and then having people say, you see. The other thing is that I've been kind of asking people as they, education people, as we have this discussion, what did you get in your college or advanced degree training about dyslexia, and understanding that the approach that we are looking at, the Orton-Gillingham type approach, comes to us from the late 1930s and 40s out of two outstanding academics who did this research. So this is not like it's coming from something that just came out of, and what is really interesting is the number of people who said, who say my specialty is reading, and I didn't have it at all. And you can look at textbooks in universities, and the word does not appear. And we can have a dialogue about why that is, but we shouldn't have it here. It's just to put a fine point on the fact that it's not like people are coming out of the woodwork and saying, I got this in school, I'm ready to go. We're going to, if we're going to do it well, we're going to have to take a little time to do it well. And so that's, even though it's not going as fast as those of us who are real gung-ho would like, there's the logic behind it is, let's not waste money on this, let's do it right. I also passed out, as you know, I had an article in the Times on the topic of dyslexia, and I've done a number of your turns over the years, and I've never received the kind of response that I got for this article. I got people sending me emails from New York and California. I got people from Edina. I had an 85-year-old teacher call me from nearby here, and and this is kind of similar to what a lot of the people wrote or called and said. He said, I'm 85 years old, my wife and I were teachers. You described my son in this article. It's just that we didn't know what it was, and he had an IQ tested not on a non-linguistic IQ test of 130, and he could not read well, and he went through all, they said, we spent, the two of us, teachers, evenings trying to figure out how to teach him, and he described some things that the dyslexia people would say, no, don't do that, please don't do that, but they didn't know. They didn't know what their kid had. And he said, Mom, my son is 50-something, he said, and he says, Dad, I just wish that somebody had figured out, because all through my life I couldn't read, and even though I was bright enough to do this and that, I didn't get promoted, or I had a nice life, but I didn't realize my potential. And I heard that from a number of people. I put in the packet an email without the name of a District 742 parent who is quite active and quite supportive, has been for many years, of the school district, but that person describes frustration in not being able to find the help that the family wanted in dealing with their student with dyslexia. I had an email from a woman from Edina who said they would not use the word dyslexia in Edina, and this is a across the state phenomenon. The specialists in this area call it the D word because they're not supposed to say it. And that's another topic for another day, but she says now Edina's got on their webpage an announcement that they screen kids and what dyslexia is and provide background information. And she said this is an amazing transformation from where Edina was when my son went through that program, and so I've left that with you. I also provided a copy of a Dear Colleague letter from the special ed people in the federal government. We all remember what a Dear Colleague letter is, right? There's a Dear Colleague letter on some disciplinary issues, and a Dear Colleague letter is actually, they're not treating you like a colleague, they're telling you what you have to do. And this is the Dear Colleague letter on dyslexia in special ed, the federal interpretation that makes it clear, because in 2015, there was a growing recognition that school districts all across the country were not recognizing the existence of dyslexia, and they convinced the special ed office in the federal government to send out a letter to school districts. You must treat dyslexia as a special ed eligible disability. Now, it doesn't mean that if you have dyslexia, you're eligible for special education, because there are other criteria, but you cannot do what districts have been doing all over the country, is saying, that's not a disability, we won't screen or test for it, you're going to have to present a different disability. So that is my report. I think there's creative tension here. The committee is supportive of the steps that are being taken. We're hoping that it's done well, and it's not going to be easy to do well, and we want to hope that the board will keep being interested. My understanding is that perhaps we may have something at the workshop. Is that right? Yep. And so we had a little dialogue at the meeting about what do you think that people will want to know, and we gave our input, and if you have input, I'm sure they'd love to hear that. Our next committee meeting is on June 27th, and we will be getting a report on the disciplinary statistics and our efforts to address the concerns of Minnesota Department of Human Rights. Thank you, that's my report.
Thank you, Jerry. And then future agenda items, and this would be for our next workshop. New Tech High School update, a Quarry View Education Center update, and a new administration offices update. We will have a discussion on the preliminary 2018-19 budget, or a presentation, I should say, on the preliminary 2018-19 budget. St. John's University Outdoor Education Partnership, a presentation on that. Dyslexia will be a topic at that work session. And then after the work session, we will go into closed session for the purpose of a routine evaluation of the superintendent. So that will all be taking place at the next workshop.
Also, Kennedy Community School is going to do part of a presentation at that.
Okay, excellent. So just for point of order to board members, if we're going to add something to the agenda, the proper time to do that would be when we approve the agenda, to pull that from the consent agenda and have a discussion at that point in time. Now, having made that point of order, I know that, Monica, we have a board member that wants to make a motion to extend another item, or add an item to tonight's agenda. So, Monica, I will turn it over to you.
I make a motion to go to a closed session and have an update in negotiations with the unions.
I'll second that.
We have a motion, we have a second, yep. Discussion.
It's not clear to me whether this is a motion, can you hear me?
Yep.
Whether this is a motion that is been prepared by HR, so the HR has a presentation, or whether this is coming from out of the blue.
Can I speak on my motion?
Yep.
So first, about parliamentary procedure, when I am being recognized, I can make motions, and that's why I did it during my report that I was being recognized. At that moment, I apologize because I forgot to add it to the agenda. In terms of the motion itself, I did check with the staff. They can give us an update. They didn't bring the materials because it wasn't included in the agenda, but I can ask Tracy to respond to that. Can you yield to her?
Jeff?
We're still having further discussion, correct?
Yep, we're in discussion.
I would urge fellow board members to respect the process and not undermine the process that we have in place and the hard work of the group, myself and several executive board members that have done the work so far. I think board member Monica is referring to the two unions that I may have been part of. And we made a very fair and final offer, and we are waiting back to hear from them. I don't support the motion.
I'm not going to support the motion because I don't think we're ready for it. I think just about the worst thing could possibly happen for a closed session is to have it without preparation. And we just wind around and everybody kind of, if it were coming the next time, and if HR had a booklet, and if the Personnel Committee, which is about to meet, had a dialogue, and then we had some information on the constraints and the issues that was ready for the board, then I'd be in support of it, but I'm not supportive of it now.
Monica?
I just wanted to clarify that the motion is to receive an update. I would like to have an update from the staff and also from the board member, Jeff Porris, that has been involved in the negotiations to understand what's happening. I'm not thinking that, or I wasn't thinking that this will undermine the process. I like to understand what are we at with those negotiations. It is a simple conversation. I don't think that we will spend the rest of the night in discussion about this. I just wanted to have an update on that. Yes, there are materials that we might not have available, but I think that to the best of their knowledge of the staff and the board member that are part of the negotiations, we should be informed about what has happening and understand better how founded or not are the questions that we are getting by emails and also through the meetings.
Mr. Chair, I would, although I'm interested in hearing where we are with some of these negotiations, I would speak against the motion because of the issue of giving staff time to prepare so that when something is presented to us, it's not just what they remember or thought of at this meeting, but something they have a chance to prepare. I would support what Mr. Von Korff is saying and schedule it after our next meeting, perhaps, where we could have a more thorough discussion of exactly where things are.
Monica?
I would like to amend the motion to have this closed session at the next meeting, but in a separate time than the evaluation of the superintendent.
Amend the motion to have it at the next meeting at a time other than the time that we gather in closed session for the superintendent's evaluation.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying? Discussion.
No, there is a second for the amendment or not?
Oh, is there a second on the amendment? What?
Jerry was seconding it.
Okay.
I have a question. Are you saying that we would like to put that on the agenda for our next meeting? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but being a motion is not a request, it's not a friendly request. We will decide it right now that it will be included.
Okay.
I interpret the motion to instruct the agenda committee to put this item on the agenda for the next meeting.
Jeff?
Monica, did you meet individually with the unions after our last board meeting? What? did you meet individually with the unions at our last board meeting to that spoke?
Mr. Chair, I think that question is out of order.
You don't want to answer it? I don't know that I'm going to call it out of order.
The question is not pertinent to the motion, is it?
Well, I was just curious of what's driving this, because we got a report from Tracy on the status of negotiations saying that 3 different unions went to mediation. I don't know what more of an update you wanted.
I feel question about my motives for the motion, and I don't have any issue in speaking to you about it. But I do feel that this is out of order, with all due respect. But Chair, if you instruct me to respond to the question, I will respond. I still think that it's out of order.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm sure I'm misunderstanding, but I thought at our last work session, when Monica made a motion to have a closed session to discuss it, that we tabled that until our next meeting. So I was expecting to see it on the agenda that we were going to close session and discussion. But again, I could be misunderstanding it. That's just how I left it as, oh, okay, well, we'll do that next time.
I don't think it was tabled.
Yeah, and again, that's just how somehow I had it in my head.
I mean, personally, I'm not involved in the negotiations of those employee groups. I think anytime that I would want an update on what was happening with those, I could go to Tracy and sit down with her and get a complete update on what was happening with negotiations for those groups. I think anytime that the board goes into closed session, we build distrust with the community because they wonder what we're planning behind closed doors. I'm not a big fan of closed sessions, especially in a situation where I'm not involved in the negotiations. So my need to know is simply a need to know, and I can go and I can get that information anytime. I can talk to Willie, I can talk to Tracy, I can talk to Jeff, who's on the committee, and I can inform myself of what's going on there. So the move into closed session for discussions or for if we're negotiation strategy or something where the administration is coming to us and saying, hey, we need to have a meeting of the board for negotiation strategy behind closed doors so that we can talk about it and the board can approve something that we can then go back to the table with and negotiate. But when we're just going there to talk, I have a real difficult time with doing that behind closed doors. I think that almost any update could happen one-on-one, individually with any board member and Tracy.
Yes, maybe I misunderstood the intent. I thought that sometimes when we're deadlocked, which we are, some members feel our offer's been super fair. We're not going to, would be unreasonable to break our budget, which is kind of where I am. And sometimes people want to double check and see if they can convince other people on the board to do something different than what we've done, which is not where I am, but which is a member's right to ask the board to reconsider. And I kind of thought that's what this was about. And if we're going to have that discussion, it ought to be in closed session. If it's just to find out what the costs of our current proposal is and how that compares, that's bargaining data, can be distributed privately to the members. It's an exception to the open meeting law, but I kind of figured that there was an interest in asking if the board feels confident that its position is sound.
Well, I didn't hear that. I heard that we wanted an update, which is saying to the public that we want to go back there and talk and get an update. If someone wants to come and say that I would like to go back into closed session so that I can discuss with the board if we can make some changes to the proposals, that's a different thing. That should be done in closed session.
So the motion should be that we have a closed session in the next board meeting for the purposes of negotiation strategy. Would that make it clear?
That would make it more clear, yes.
Okay, I accept the friendly amendment to my amendment.
Mr. Mose.
Yes, I'm sorry.
The motion.
It was just amended to a motion to ask the Agenda Planning Committee to set a time on the next school board meeting agenda for negotiations, a closed session on negotiation strategy.
I was only clarifying that I thought Monica was trying to say. It's not my motion.
Who's making the motion?
Monica.
It's Monica.
You are, and that's the motion that you are agreeing to, that was just stated by Al. I just got it.
Yeah, yeah.
And who's seconding that motion?
Jerry.
Okay.
Willie.
So my question is, what Mr. Von Korff, where he went with that, is, because I heard Mr. Henches say the way that you rephrased the motion. So my question is this: when it's to discuss negotiation strategies, that's one. If it's to get an update, that's another. And there is my question. If it's in terms of getting an update, I just have that question. I'll leave it at that. I just need to ask the board. What is the purpose of the closed session?
That was my question.
Could I just maybe I'm not the maker of this motion, and I haven't totally decided how I'm going to vote on it yet, but when negotiations go on a long time, wouldn't it be common that at some point the board would want to get together in a closed session to kind of evaluate, discuss strategy or whatever? Or is it more common that, let's say this goes on another 8 months or a year or whatever, that there's never another closed session to just discuss where we're at and are there any changes that should be made in our strategy or anything like that? I mean, is it inappropriate to have a closed session to discuss how's it going and do we need to change strategy or?
So no, I don't. I mean, for me as chair, I don't feel that it's inappropriate to do that. I would think that generally, though, when that was necessary, the request would either come from the administration or the person who's involved in the negotiations.
Okay. Yeah.
Because those are the people that are involved in it, and if they get to a roadblock and they feel that they need some change from the board or from what we've authorized for them, then they would come back to the board and ask us. So Jerry.
If I could express my thoughts. First of all, I think our offer is fair. I believe that the people on the other side need to continue to hear that. But there does happen from time to time that a board member will feel that our position, that maybe we ought to find some more money, and we've had that dialogue in situations with teachers and with other organizations, and I don't think that we should, in fact, I think that we are stronger in our bargaining position if some people have concerns that we have that dialogue, because I think when they see the numbers again and have that dialogue, we're going to come out of that stronger and send a message that may help and reassuring the people who kind of want a reality check, I think is an important positive bargaining strategy. Again, I support the opportunity of members who may have misgivings about our position to have that dialogue in a closed session. Even though I don't have those misgivings, I think it's useful to have that discussion, and I heard Monica feeling that she wanted a reality check. That would be bargaining strategy.
And my reason for my question is that from an administrative standpoint, we need to understand, we're looking for direction in terms of what we need to come prepared with if we're doing a closed session. That's I'm looking at Executive Director Tracy from Bow, and so we're just looking for direction. If we decide to have a closed session, what is the board's request?
Mr. Superintendent, traditionally, at the Personnel Committee meeting, by the time we had the Personnel Committee meeting, we would have heard if there are people who have concerns, and we would use the Personnel Committee meeting. We'd have a little closed session of the Personnel Committee meeting to try and figure out what Tracy needs to bring so that when she comes, we have the information that board members need to confront this question. How do we feel about where we are? And so that, I think the answer to that's why I think having the Personnel Committee meeting first is going to make this go easier.
We need to respond a little bit, my version of that. I do like to understand the strategy that we're following, but it's not that I have a concern right now. I also like to hear from the board member that is part of those negotiations about what his impressions are about those negotiations. If I don't understand that, I don't know how can I propose a strategy. So last time, we're hearing things from the community, and we had a lot of people coming to us, and as Jerry said, I think that we are stronger if we have a discussion together and we are all kind of in the same page with the same understanding. I don't think that is achieved the same way if I just have a conversation separate with different people. I do believe that is what a conversation that we need to have as a body. So I think that Tracy, I would like to ask her if she's clear about what we're asking. Can I yield to Tracy?
Sure, we can be prepared to summarize the last offers on both the clerical and the nutritional services as well as the principals, and to give you the context for those offers.
Is that to Monica or in a closed session?
In a closed session. I can do that individually with any board member, of course, but we'll prepare documents to be able to share that with the board in a full presentation in a closed session.
So it's an update, not a negotiation strategy, or is it both?
Well,
one's appropriate, one's probably not, in my book.
But typically, we go around the table and people are asked, are you comfortable with where we are? And typically people say, yep, we are, by golly, we've been, but occasionally one member might say, I have misgivings, can't we find some money somewhere? And that's an appropriate discussion. It may make the administration nervous because we're not sitting on a pile of money, and we've tried to be fair across the board, and but it's an appropriate discussion to have, and I really do think, even though I may be on a different pole of this, that I think at the end of the day, especially for newer members, that it would be useful to have that discussion. I've been in 8 or 9 of those discussions, and Bruce Henches, I think you've been in a number of them as well, but the newer board members haven't, and I think it would be helpful.
Jeff.
With that being said, and having the motion amended 3 times, 2 times, whatever it was, I could support getting an update from administration at the next board meeting, and if that must be in a closed session, fine. I wasn't in support of it being just brought up tonight. That was my main issue. You have to give admin time to prepare for a request of that magnitude.
Any further discussion?
I just want
Bruce.
I just want to Ian, and I think the fairness of operational preparation is important to me, and I didn't see that you had a sheet of papers or anything here ready for tonight, but probably here. But I think that operational preparation is a necessity, and I think it's a courtesy. And so I am not supportive of anything this evening, no matter how many times it's amended. I am supportive of something future, and let's put it on the agenda, and let's have it in that manner. I'm speaking to my preference. I'm not making a motion or amending anything.
Nope, I didn't think you were.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Could I hear the motion in verbiage, detailed?
The motion...
So it addresses Willie's, is it negotiation or is it an update?
The motion, as I understand it, in its tertiary form, is a motion to direct the Agenda Planning Committee to include a closed session in the next board meeting for an update, no, not for an update, well, for a negotiation strategy. And that motion was seconded, yes.
And that's a Monica motion and a Jerry second, is
yes.
That right? Wow. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, you know, so I just...
is there any further discussion? If not, Mr. Moses, would you call roll?
Maker of the motion, Monica Segura Schwartz.
Yes.
Second maker, Jerry Von Cork.
Yes.
Bruce Moses, yes. Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Jeff Police.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
What was so difficult about that whole process?
Well, I still will go back to the point of order, and Monica, yes, you can do that, but as a point of order, any time that you're planning to make an agenda change to a meeting, the best time to do it is not at the end of the meeting, but instead at the very beginning of the meeting, before we approve the agenda for the evening, so that other board members have time to prepare. It's unfair, I think, not only to Tracy in this case, but it's unfair to other board members to ask us to go into a closed session and have a discussion about something that we had no idea that we were supposed to be prepared to discuss. And so with that, I mean, that's when I would ask people to make motions to change an agenda, is at that point in time. So, or before the meeting, or before the agenda planning meeting would be best. So, if there's no further discussion, is there any further discussion? If not, meeting is adjourned.